Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Round Robin. I am your host, Tracy Preston. Along with me is Christine Mulligan, Nina Mulligan, Regina Lindsay, Angela Sinclair, and of course, my husband, Todd Preston. Hey, everyone.
Hey. Hello. Hi. Hi.
Hey, everybody.
All right, on today's episode, we are going to be talking about the story we did on Diane Newton King in season 3. Here's a quick rundown for you. Diane was half white and half American Indian who belonged to the Mohawk tribe. She was a go-getter, and she had her mindset on becoming a morning anchor woman. And even though she got started late in life in this business, she did it. And she had her morning show and was really making a name for herself. Diane was married to an ex-cop named Bradford, or Brad. She had 2 children, a 3-year-old son and a 3-month-old baby girl. Her husband supported Diane as she was climbing her way up to becoming an anchor woman. Brad taught criminal justice part-time at his alma mater, Western Michigan University. And Brad had been married once before. Everything seemed to be going well for the couple, but it was when the children kind of came along that the relationship started to kind of stray a little bit, well, at least for Brad. And especially when Diane was pregnant with her second child, that's when it got even worse. Brad was having affairs with students from Western, and that's a bad deal. One day at the newsroom, Diane had begun receiving phone calls from a man that said he wanted to break into the business and was hoping Diane could give him some pointers. And she felt like, wow, that's cool. That's what she did when she wanted to break in, and so she gave the caller some helpful tips. But the calls just kept coming into the station pretty much on the daily. Then things started to get a little weird when the caller invited Diane to meet him for lunch. And well, that was it. She turned her down, then told everyone at the station she would no longer be taking any calls and to start screening those damn calls. One day when Diane went home, she found one of those creepy letters placed in her mailbox. The letter was not written. Instead, words had been cut out of magazines and glued to the paper. And that note said, "You should have gone to lunch with me." At this point, Diane thinks she has herself a crazy stalker. And so Diane and Brad put a safety plan in place, and she would never be home alone. Diane did all the right things to stay safe, always telling everyone where she was. She wouldn't even get out of her car until Brad walked out of the house. Now, I believe the day she was killed that she saw Brad, just like she always did before getting out of the car. Before Diane knew what happened, she was shot in the heart from above, then a second shot at close range, which had entered just above her pubic bone, and that traveled up through her body into her lung. A stalker it wasn't. The enemy was sleeping in her own bed. Ugh, all right, guys, so that's just a quick little wrap up. I still kind of left a lot of other stuff out, but just kind of wanted to give a quick little recap on the story of Diane. So, welcome, everyone.
All right. Let me just get right into my crazy theory. From the jump, from the moment that Diane started receiving calls from an anonymous fan that wanted to break into the business, that had to be her husband playing sick mind games. He wanted, the whole thing was a ruse in his ability to manipulate situations and mind fuck her. Like, literally, that's my theory. Because this guy was a professor, and essentially, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but his whole shtick was teaching his students how to commit the perfect crime. Right? That was this one, right?
Yeah, you're spot on. That's exactly what he did.
So, right there, that tells you that he liked mindfuckery. He liked trying to find the loopholes. He liked trying to find the unquestionable doubt of it all. And I think that he's the one that called her because he knew that that's how she got into the business. He knew that she had a mentor in her life that kind of catapulted her self-confidence and her belief in her own abilities to be able to break into the news anchoring business. He knew that story. So he knew that that would affect her deeply. So he started the mindfuckery right from the jump. And that's all I'll let everybody else talk about all the other pieces, which is, you know, the letter and then the subsequent murder. But that's my 2 cents, is the mindfuckery and the manipulation and the evilness that this man had. It all stems all the way back to the beginning of the stalker.
I agree with you.
So there's actually an article about this crime on a site. It's called It's Crime O'Clock Somewhere. Try saying that one 3 times fast. But anyway, actually it said that he was an abusive asshole, and she had gone to work with bruises and told her coworkers that she believed that he had been sending her the threatening letters. So she was on to him apparently from relatively early on.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. That's what it says in this article. Well, so she kind of had his number because he's a creepy asshole.
Yeah, but we didn't talk about that in the first podcast, did we, Trace? We didn't know that, did we?
Well, I think it was in part 2. During the trial, there was a friend of hers at work, and I think it was her that, she had said that to, like, I think Brad's doing this, he's trying to scare me. He's done this before. And I think she even mentioned something about some bruises. So I did forget about that, Regina. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Yeah, typical, right? And as you were talking, Christine, I just sat there and I started thinking, this is extra, extra creepy, because if you think about it, that semester or whenever he started it with these college kids, like, say, all right, I want you to break off and I want you to figure out how to commit the perfect crime. So, and I think you even mentioned something about this when we were doing the show, Christine, that, he was thinking about killing his wife and thought, hey, let's get these kids. Maybe they'll come up with something I can use, which is totally nuts.
Yeah, he's a special kind of narcissist.
Extra credit was given if he got away with it.
I'm sorry, what?
Extra credit was given if he got away with it.
Right. They all pass, that one group. Yeah. You get an A. Thanks. That worked. Yeah, I just don't understand it, and I'll never understand it. I mean, people have affairs, whatever. So you had an affair. If you're that miserable, I just can't understand why people just don't deal with the mess, get the divorce, and move on. Like, what person thinks that actually killing your wife or killing your husband is the smartest thing to do to get out of a marriage?
Well, I don't think his initial goal was to kill her. I think, like a cat with a ball of yarn, he wanted to play mind games with her. He wanted to control her. He wanted to abuse her and belittle her and feel emboldened and empowered like he was something.
Wait.
I think the murder only came along maybe because she started suspecting him, or maybe because she started wising up a little bit. Maybe that's when he started thinking about murdering her. Because she did go to her mom's without him, and that wasn't totally normal, right? You know what gets me, though? I'm sorry, I want to rewind for a second. Is the fact that they came up with a safety plan together. So this maniacal fucker was knowing what he was doing to her and tormenting her. And then he wanted to placate her and play the nice guy to only scare her more while they were going through ways to be safe.
That's extra creepy.
Yeah. It's maniacal.
It is maniacal.
But not only that, but when they have a plan in place, then he can also figure out ways around the plan.
Exactly. So it's like he was playing a chess game, but being told the moves ahead of time. Like he was trying to fix his own game. It's crazy. The whole thing's insane.
he loved this woman at one point. I mean, he had to, right? Got married. They used to go to powwows, making corn soup, having a good
No,
time.
I don't ever want to say that this guy loved this woman, because when you love people, you don't do things like that to them ever. So he never loved her. However, she obviously fell in love with him, and he obviously had control over her because she was in love with him. So he liked that. I don't think he ever had feelings for this woman more than as a play toy and a pawn in the game of his life.
I can't argue with that. And he was married, as I mentioned. He was married before, and I think he had a daughter when they were married, and they had she got pregnant. I think that's when he was like, "Deuces, I can't do it." So I wish I had more information on what happened to this dude when he was a kid, because there's something to do with once you add kids into the mix, that's when he's not in it anymore.
Well, he's not getting all the attention anymore. So
Right, right.
Right.
Well, because maternal instinct kicks in, and her primary focus was the children and not him, because he's a narcissist and he wants primary attention, focus all the time on him.
There you
Yeah,
go.
just affairs with his students.
Yeah, lots of affairs.
They feel powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So he got more maniacal as his receding hairline kept going back. Like by the end, like a damn monk. He looked like one of the monks, where it's just like the neck hair. You know? Oh my gosh. But I want to say this. Honestly, I think I'm glad that the police at least wrapped it up in the end, but I feel like they're the ones that botched it up from the beginning and why it took so long to come to this conclusion. Because to be quite honest with you, I get the whole like stalker thing, but in every and all situations, like it is standard protocol to take a good, hard look at the spouse. Like, that's the first person. And usually we end up criticizing cops because they spend so much time looking at the spouse that they fail to recognize that it could have been somebody else, right? So it's like, I feel like this was like a bizarre twist where they just decided, whoop-de-doo, he couldn't have done it, and then focus solely on that. And I say that because there were like key things when they went to the house. So they had the best dog. This was the best police dog in all of America, okay? And he ran the route of the house and of the path and all the way around, came back and then sat in the driveway. And they said that he failed to pick up on a scent. And I'm thinking, no, he didn't. The thing is that the suspect, the last time he was at the house, was right before he got into the cop car for the cops to take him to the station to talk to him. Like, the dog literally stopped where the husband was last. That's why he only followed the husband's scent. There was no other scent to go because the suspect left.
That's a really good point that you brought up, because I didn't really think about where Brad was when the dog came back from, tracking the scent, right? Because there were lots of other people in the driveway. That's interesting, Nina, that you pointed that out. Was Brad standing in the driveway? Was he out there? And the dog's like, yo, dude, look over here.
He got in the cop car to go to the station with the cops, no?
Yeah, they took him down to the station.
Yeah. So they said this dog failed. In all reality, he did.
No,
and while there, they found evidence of a .22 caliber shotgun cleaning tools and more ammo. And again, why would you have that in your house if you didn't have a .22 gauge shotgun? They didn't bother to check any of the woods in the back. And then they just took this guy's word for it and ran with it. Like, he's a criminal person that teaches people how to get out of crimes. He used to be a cop, so, like, wouldn't you think he might know a thing or two on how to get around things with you. Like, I just don't understand how they went directly to it.
Well, the thing is you're failing to just say the obvious, in that the dog was smarter than the cops.
100%.
Well, I think especially back then too, there was this tendency for cops to give deference to other cops. I mean, even if they were no longer on the force or whatever, but if they're teaching criminal justice and they're teaching these types of things, there was always this tendency for police to just kind of skim over the investigation of a colleague, past or present, which is why nowadays they usually have a different department investigate, or internal affairs investigates anything where, you know, the victim was, you know, married to a cop, because it's super easy for their buddies to just kind of not really do their best job investigating.
Right, because he's still a part of the club.
Yeah.
The good old boys club.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then on top of that, there's this narcissistic asshole that, like, yeah, he teaches a class on how to get away with murder, essentially, right? And thinking he's the smartest guy in the room. And if that's the case, this is pretty sloppy on his part to leave the .22 rifle cleaning tools and the ammo in the house and say you don't have a .22 rifle. But this is me armchair quarterbacking all these years later, too. But still, I mean, there's just something about that just infuriates me. The fact that, you know, he's just sitting back there and kind of laughing, and then having this whole, oh, I'm going to make a plan to keep you safe, you know, playing the hero. No, who's going to keep you safe if I don't? You can't go anywhere. Like, who's going to protect you? You can't leave. If you leave, there's not going to be anybody to protect you from this maniac. And then also this whole process of her coming home and not getting out of the car until she sees his face means that he knows exactly where she's going to be. He's got a beat on her before she even knows what the hell's happening, because she knows that she's not supposed to get out of the car until she sees his face.
Right, and I think about that too, because we know that Brad was in the second level of the barn, and, you know, did she honk the horn? Did he actually show his face? Because I'm thinking, you know, the barn door, there was a barn door on the second floor. So did he like kind of pop that open? Hey babe, I'm up here. All good.
And maybe coaxed her out, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then, like, I mean, how, like, that's just crazy to me. Like, you know that she's, well, and the thing was too, he did know she was coming, because he finally got the call from Diane's mom, right? Because when Diane left her parents' house, her stepdad was on the phone, and that was, you know, they didn't have any cell phone stuff like that. So once her dad got off the phone, mom calls, hey, she's on her way. So he's like, all right, cool. Because the original plan was those kids were going to stay at mom's. They needed some time together, some quality time. And the baby, Catarese, she was super sick, and she was breastfeeding, and the mom's like, no, you really need to take that baby. I'll keep the other one. So he was like, tonight's the night. No kids. I'm going to get her. This is the night. And then, right, so he gets her to come out of the car, shoots her, one shot from above and then one shot from below after she's down. And the other thing that makes me nuts is when he got up, after shooting his wife, because, right, he either had to be laying on the ground with the trajectory that the bullet entered her, right, so she's laying on her back. He had to have either laid down on the ground or squatted down really low to hit her a second time. So when he got up, those kids were screaming and crying. So if you didn't see them, you would have heard them. But you know damn well he walked over to make sure she was dead, and boom, there's the kids. Screaming and crying. I got to keep moving on with my plan. I'm going to go call the cops now.
He obviously didn't care anything about the kids because he left them in the damn car the whole entire time. Like, who does that?
Right. a 3-year-old and a 3-month-old.
He didn't want the kids in the first place. That's one of the things I think that set him off, you know.
I agree. But I mean, wow. I mean, the whole thing is heartless, but I mean, to not even love your own flesh and blood enough to want to comfort them. I mean, you got a 3-month-old who's crying, you got a 3-year-old who's probably screaming and crying. And I don't know, I mean, time frame. You know, by the time the cops got there, by the time the ambulance got there, by the time they said, okay, come on, boys, it's safe. Let's work on this woman. So, I mean, we all know how long that takes. So maybe another 45 minutes to an hour. Those kids are still stuck in the car.
Well, the thing is, you got to remember, he had to do a run through the woods and stuff the gun in a mud pit and come all the way back, all the way around the other way. So those kids were in there screaming the whole time. So by the time he got back, if he would have taken them out of the car before the cops got there, then it would have been more of a mess everywhere. And the 3-year-old would have been talking. The 3-year-old would have firsthand undoubtedly seen mommy on the floor and probably started talking. So he was probably hedging his bets that the 3-year-old couldn't see above the seats.
Yeah.
And as long as he was in the car, he didn't see what happened, so he couldn't be a witness.
That's true, right? Because they were strapped in their car seats.
Mm-hmm.
And since they were crying the whole time he did his lap in the woods, they were probably so distraught looking that it wouldn't have made sense that they would still be that distraught looking. If that would have happened, he would have came up on them and took them out of the car. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because the kid would likely have just been calm if he would have just took them out of the car. Like if he would have shot her and then right after came and took them out of the car, they would have been startled, but they probably would have not cried. Especially if he took them out of the opposite side of the car than she was on. Do you know what I mean? They would have been fine. Because they heard the loud shots, then heard him running and grunting, and then were left probably for a good 20, 25 minutes. That's why they were crying. It wasn't because of the initial shot.
Well, look at you laying it all out there.
Well, you know, I got the smarts like Officer McGruff. The dog. That was the smartest being on the crime scene. Officer McGruff.
Officer McGruff. Officer McMillan. No, fuck that. Scrap.
McGruff is tough on crime. The unfortunate thing is the human police officers don't understand.
Exactly. What's up, hon?
I think I have a theory about the phone calls because
okay.
We know he manipulates people. I mean, he manipulates his wife, and he's probably manipulating the students as well. Say he's got a student that's in danger of failing the class.
Okay.
Hey, you make these phone calls for me, and we're going to get you a passing grade, and you can still play football.
How about that? Okay. Because she never recognized the voice. It was a weird voice, so who made the call?
Right, because it would be strange because I can talk to you in a different voice. You're still going to be able to tell it's me, though, right?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's one way to disguise your voice is it not be your voice.
That's true. Good one, hon.
McGruff.
McGruff, too. Are you McGruff's partner? Good point. But you know what? And if so, if someone did help make these calls, like, isn't it weird that they never came forward? They're like, hell no, I'm not getting involved in that.
Exactly.
Okay.
I was just thinking the same thing. Like, why wouldn't they? If he had approached someone and said, you're failing the class or whatever, bribed somebody to make the calls, I would think that they might have come forward because at that point they're not going to really be the scapegoat, right? But maybe, I mean, like, what if, for example, he told the class, oh, well, we're role-playing this, made them think that his wife was in on it or whatever. I mean, you know, he is twisted and in his head's playing this game of chess, but you know, either way, I still wonder why, if there was an accomplice making the phone calls, they wouldn't have come forward at the point that he was arrested.
I just had another thought to add into this whole theory, right? So back at the class at Western, you guys go over there, figure out the perfect murder, and you guys got to act it all out. So
Right.
maybe, right? Maybe they didn't even know they were calling his wife. Maybe it was all, maybe he recorded it and then played the recording when the wife would answer the phone. Or maybe,
Valid.
maybe this is the scenario. Now what? Maybe he gave the whole scenario to a group.
Right.
You know what, guys? We need McGruff Incorporated.
McGruff in the mitten.
McGruff in the.
Oh, Lord. We're not all in the mitten, Todd.
Like Regina said, we're armchair quarterbacking. We know all the details, and then we get to reevaluate them. So it does make it easier in hindsight, most definitively. But Nina's point about the dog going in that full circle and then stopping in the driveway where, by the way, the husband just got in a car and took off from. I don't know why the cops just, what's the word I'm searching for? They just dismissed that.
Well, especially because while he was at the station, he was busy telling them about how he had gone for the walk, sat down, looked at the stars, and then realized that his wife should be getting home by now. And then he walked back up at the path, and then that's when he found her, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, he's literally telling him the dog just walked the entire path. And the dog didn't try to, like, go off in any other direction, like, oh, I lost the scent here. It was just like, oh, we're back at the driveway. This is it. You know? Like, they never put those two and two together in the beginning, and I just, maybe it was the good old boys thing. Like you said, I don't know. I just, like, wow.
Can't help but think the dog was probably sitting there going, dude, the fucker just got in the car and left.
Exactly. And
why is nobody paying attention?
I just felt bad for the dog because they called him a failure. And he was literally the best one in the country. I was like, that dog did not fail. You failed.
Exactly. The dog was telling you, and you're not listening. And, you know, the other thing I'm thinking is that, you know, I mean, how many crimes happen in Marshall, right? Or some of these other little towns. So, you know, these cops go through their training and, you know, cop school, whatever, police school, and then they're out on the job. And it's like they forget all the things they were taught. Or, like, are they supposed to take continuing classes, like continuing education? Like, okay, guys, like once a month, we have to have this scenario. How do you process a scene? How do you keep the lens wide open? You know what I mean? It's like, because it's like story after story after story after story. It's like these fuckers can't remember how to do their job.
Well, they do kind of go through, well, nowadays they probably definitely go through continuous training. But for that time, they probably did continuously train. First off, they go through the police academy, but then they're just, you know, beat cops or whatever the term is for whatever area it's in. They don't become detectives and start doing murder investigations until they go through testing and on-the-job training and all of that. So you gotta recognize that when you're thinking about the moments that these cops have, because all of the King's horses and all the King's men, all the cops of all different levels, the beat cops and the detectives, they're all at this crime scene. The dog comes in, does exactly what the dog is supposed to do, and they're just like, oh, but you were a fellow man in blue. Okay, well, let's just have a friendly discussion at the station, and I'm gonna partially believe you because you used to be a cop.
Or maybe they took their continuing education from him.
Maybe.
They were students. But, you know, not every town, because I mean, you know, where we live, I don't think our police department has a detective. They're just all cops. They're not higher level.
No, they have rankings. They're all different ranks within each station.
But here's the thing that's the craziest part, though. It was still a year after her murder that they finally arrested him. Like, it still took them that long. Even when they ruled out the whole crazy stalker person, because they went to his house and then realized that, he was just a homebound adult individual, that was really enthusiastic about getting autographs from people on TV. So they ruled that out very quickly, right? But it's like, where they just stopped. I don't know. And then finally someone just said, hey, maybe we should take a look at the husband. No, it wasn't until one of the students came forward or somebody from the school said, hey, yo, this dude's sleeping with his students. That's when they decided to investigate him. So it's still like, had he not slipped up in that arena, they may not have ever pointed to him.
I'm thinking. Sorry. Didn't mean to have such a long pause there, but
Don't hurt yourself.
I know it. I was like, whoa. So, I mean, I just want to back up because I feel like I'm getting confused on something here. So, the guy who had the dog, Travis, right, took the dog out there, saw the .22 casing, had the dog run around, all that kind of stuff. And it was kind of late, remember? So it was dark. He was having a hard time seeing. So that's why they didn't find the gun that was shoved down into the muddy river bottom. But I feel like they were kind of thinking, yeah, none of this is making any sense. I thought, from what I remember, they were, they kind of knew it was him, but they had to wait. Because remember at the funeral, they're like, oh, we want to get him here. We want to pinch him now. But they really had to get more solid evidence before they could do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think from our podcast, I believe it did allude to the fact that they suspected him, but they didn't have enough on him, which did confuse me. Because I was like, the shell casing's up in the barn, his scent going all the way around, the dog sensing him coming all the way back, the ammo that he still had for a gun that he supposedly didn't own. Like, all of that was, I don't even understand why they didn't put that together quicker. Because they knew it all, right away. And they were suspecting him right away. But it's like they didn't really pursue him as a suspect until the student fuckery started coming up. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah.
They also pulled in, so remember the two housekeepers. So before Brad and Diane moved to Marshall, I want to say they were living in Battle Creek. I can't remember.
Yeah,
I think it was Battle Creek.
Yeah.
Right, so they got in touch with the housekeepers, and they're like, yeah, we weren't to clean the basement, but we had to clean those stairs going down into the basement, and right out in the open, 2 long guns. One of them's like, I don't know names of guns. I just know they were long, skinny barrels on these long guns sitting on a bar or on a counter downstairs in the basement. Could see it because we had to get all the way to the bottom step. But it was the second housekeeper who's like, that's a .22 when they pulled it out. Because remember, that was the one they pulled from the riverbed. And she's like, oh yeah, that's straight up a .22. I know .22s. Do.
Right. So it wasn't until they literally had the smoking gun identified as in his possession that they nailed him to the cross.
Right.
But they didn't even really go after him to get him to trial until the student fuckery. So that is confusing.
Yeah, they didn't press him. They didn't even try to make him confess or anything like that. I mean, if you think about it, yes, okay, it's considered substantial evidence or whatever. Circumstantial evidence, yeah. True, but it's also beyond a shadow of doubt. So I don't think any jury would look at just what we've talked about, even if they had never found the gun, let's say. There's no reasonable suspicion that it would have been anybody else.
Correct.
There just would have been no reason because they already ruled out that it wasn't a stalker person. So who else would have benefited from this? Well, him. He would be the only person to benefit. because she actually was rumored to want to be leaving, her job and spend more time with her children because her passion was really to be a mom, which meant he would have had to have stepped up financially and not done his whole little part-time, student fuckery on the side stuff. He would have had to have then become the breadwinner. So there's tons of motives here. Like the fact they never honed in on him until it was undeniable that they should just perplexes me.
Well, and two things, right? One, I would really like to know why in the hell they were not allowed to, right? Because they had the girls there, but they had to be very careful about bringing up their relationships with this guy. That was not allowed to be talked about during the trial. They had to be very careful with that. That I don't understand. Right? So why is it that they couldn't talk about his little escapades? Why was that not allowed to be in the trial? Because that has every bit of motive all wrapped up in having affairs.
Well, his defense attorneys probably had that deemed prejudicial. And I don't understand that about the legal system at all. Why you're not allowed to bring up characterizations of the defendant because they're prejudicial and they don't have any bearing on the case. Because it's like the person is who the person is, good, bad, and indifferent. And every person does have good, bad, and indifferent. But sexual extracurricular marital activities, extramarital activities, should definitely have been brought up in a case of murdering your spouse.
Okay, but just because you cheat on your spouse, it doesn't make you a murderer. Does it?
No, but I'm gonna guess that probably he just had really good defense attorneys, and they argued that his sexual conduct after his wife's murder had no bearing on the case.
Yeah, so is that the thing, that it was after his wife's murder? But he was fooling around with students while he was still married, while she was still alive, was he not?
Yes, he was.
Well, he was, but I don't think that's what they were necessarily talking about, because it really came to light after the fact, and that's what caused the police to kind of, look at him. I don't know, but a good defense attorney would argue that it was immaterial. And it sounds like they had a sympathetic judge.
Yeah, because he's still in the Blue Club, cop or not, anymore.
Yeah, It's also the timing of this. It was in the 80s, was it not?
90s, 90s, early 90s.
So it was still a little more steeper in the patriarchal kind of thing.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, well, let's look at Tara Lynn Grant, her husband, that little gem. He was having an affair with the au pair. That was his impetus to, think that he's all that in a bag of chips, like Angela likes to say. Right? That's right. It emboldened him because, hey, I've got all this. I mean, I don't. It was just kind of like a snap moment that he attacked her, but maybe it built him up, because if you think about it, I've got my point back. So while Diane is busting her ass because she wanted to be an anchor woman, right? Brad, who had a master's degree, was working at a pizza shop. He was working at, I don't know, Walgreens or whoever. Right? He was just doing all these really bizarro jobs for someone who had a master's degree. And so, back to Nina's point where she's like, Diane now wants to stay home. Well, what in the hell went on in the house where she's finally just going to say, you know what, it's going to be your turn, Brad, now. I mean, she just finally got to be an anchor and she was getting pretty damn successful. And now all of a sudden she's going to stay home and take care of the kids and let Brad do his thing. Going back to what you guys are talking about, like, what was he saying to her? What type of manipulation, bullshit was he doing with her at home on the regular, probably, to break her down, that she would say, oh, now it's Brad's turn after I just obtained my goal?
Well, I saw a show where they did some interviews with friends of hers, and they are the ones that were confirming that she was wanting to slow down and switch because she had been the breadwinner for so long. And that when the new baby came along, she was wanting to slow down and enjoy them more. And so I don't know if she was going to leave being a news person, completely, but there were talks of her wanting to make a change so that she was more available for time with her children. So that came from her friends.
Okay.
So I think, that may have been what she wanted to do, and that would have been motive for him to, want to offer, because he wouldn't have wanted that. That would have put a crimp in his luxury lifestyle of, part-time dad, full-time adulterer.
Right, because now she's going to be like, well, where the hell you been? How many nights you working late this week? Why are you doing that? Right, because it was easy before. Hey, she's always busy working on, her next story.
Be interesting. Did they say anything about life insurance policy on her?
I don't remember there being anything about a life insurance policy. Did you hear anything about that when you were, watching some of these other interviews and stuff like that, Nina?
They never talked anything about money, so that was not a motive.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not like they had a ton of money anyway. You know what I mean? Like, how much does working as a professor one night a week make? I can't imagine it's a ton of money. And then Diane wasn't making, I think she was maybe making 30-something thousand when she was in her anchor spot.
Yeah.
They didn't own the home. It was a rental. Now granted it was on 200 acres, but it was a rental.
Yeah, but 30-something thousand was pretty good money back then.
It's 1991, though. It still doesn't seem like a lot.
Yeah.
Well,
not for a household.
I remember, like my first management job, and that was like 1996 or 97, and I was making less than $30,000 a year, and that was good money. It was significant. I know it sounds crazy, but that was well before nursing school.
Well, 1904, when I had my first job, I think minimum wage was still $3.75 in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, the economy was better. Things weren't so damn expensive.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I'm reading another article about this because, I'm a multitasker and ADD. But anyway, there is apparently a show on Oxygen, and the show was called Killer Relationship, but they interviewed the son, the 3-year-old. He was 3 years old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the son said, he said it was his earliest memory.
Wow.
I do remember my mom getting out of the vehicle and then gunshots.
No
way. One minute she was there and the next she's not. I think I was screaming more than anything, and then it ultimately woke up my sister.
Wow. I got to write that down.
His first memory.
What was the name of that show?
Yeah, that's the one that I watched. It's a good show.
What was the name of that?
Killer Relationships.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Killer what?
Relationships.
What channel was that on?
Oxygen.
Thank you. I want to see that.
That makes sense, though. Traumatic memories, I think, are more likely memorable to young kids like that, because I was 2 years old when I had to get stitches across my nose, and I only remember it because it was traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
My mom said, "You can't possibly remember that." I was like, "Yeah, because my Aunt Teresa was in the room with us," and she's like, "How do you know? You must have heard that." Nope, I remember Aunt Teresa being in there with us.
Sense memory.
Yep.
My middle son, my 2 boys were playing, and they had a big duck that was like a stuffed duck. That was like one of those gun ducks, Gund, got to get a gun, the big stuffed toys. They had a big duck in that corner of their room, and they were playing, and one of them had a lock, like a combination lock, and I don't know how they got it, why they had it, whatever. My bad as a mom. They had gotten their hands on a combination lock. Well, McGuire was being annoying to Declan, and McGuire was all of maybe 4 years old at the time. And what had happened was, or what they told me, was that McGuire like pushed the lock at him and hit him on the knee. So Declan picked it up and threw it at the duck. McGuire ducked behind the duck and he got hit in the noggin with the combination lock. And as children's heads will do when they are hit with something heavy, he split open like a cantaloupe. So we ended up having to bring him to the emergency room, and he got a couple of staples in his head. Only like 3 staples. It wasn't that big of a cut, but it bled a lot because heads do as they do. They bleed when cut profusely. And to this day, he still remembers that whole story. Like, he tells that story. He remembers it all, and he was only 4 years old.
I was 3. I remember when my mom left my dad. I remember the night that we left. I remember he had finally passed out on the couch, and my mom, like, I know what it is now, but she took the emergency brake off, and we pushed the car out of the driveway. She did. I was in the seat. She left a note in the mailbox, and then she waited until we got a little bit down the street, and then she turned the car on, and we left. And we drove to my grandfather's house.
I used to sneak out of the house all the time like that.
That was a good sneaker outer. Your parents listen to this show, hun.
My dad does.
Your dad does. You're busted.
Oh, shoot.
You're so busted. Yeah, that sense of
I
memory
never
is
did
crazy.
that.
Todd was a professional. How many nights a week would you do that shit, hon?
3 or 4.
3 or 4. Why don't you tell the little story?
Oh.
Because it's out now.
Oh, so
Now your dad will know all the deets.
my bedroom was down in the basement, and the only way to get out of the house was, of course, to go up the stairs and through the whole house, or through the cellar door in the back of the basement. And of course, it's this big metal door. Sometimes it would take me an hour just to get through that door because it was so creaky. So I'd have to open it a little bit, and then, of course, closing it, being just as quiet, but it would take forever to sneak out sometimes. And then, remember, Tracy, you said, well, why don't you put a little WD-40? Well, then they're going to know that somebody fixed the door, and why would Todd be fixing the door?
Yeah,
Right?
why do you even know it's squeaky creaky?
Right.
Were you in this dude's class? I'm just saying, because it sounds like you thought that through way too well.
No, just wanted to go out and do the things I wasn't supposed to do.
My parents are well aware that I used to sneak out all the time because I'm old now, so they know all the stories. So I am not going to be busted to say that I snuck out on the reg. When I was a little bit younger, I lived upstairs. We had a 3-story house, but the first story was like mostly a basement. It was a finished basement. And I lived on the 2nd story. That's where my bedroom was. And at the end of the hallway upstairs was a window. And underneath that window was the top of the breezeway that was in between the house and the garage. So I used to just go to the end of the hallway, jump out the window, and then jump off the roof of the breezeway. Getting back in was harder. I would have to go and get something to step on and, like, leave it there. And then in the morning when I would get up, I would go and move it. I would get up early to go move it. But usually it was pretty easy because I was coming home an hour before I can make believe I woke up, you know?
Mm-hmm. You guys are bad. I snuck out once with Lynette Johnson. We had to shimmy out the window, and then they had like the aluminum overhang kind of over the front door.
Oh, yeah.
So we got onto that, and we shimmied on down. And then, but that was unsuccessful because as we were coming back, you could hear her mother, Lenny! And we're like, oh my God. And her mom was scary as shit. And I'm like, we were so fucking busted. Oh my God, we were busted bad. And then it was like, that was the only time I ever snuck out. I'm like, nope, never doing that shit again.
I never did sneak out, but I had a cousin who lived with us for a little while, and she decided to sneak out. And apparently, one of my parents heard her. So my father got up and bolted all of the windows shut. So she had to ring the doorbell. And she got back.
That's a good one. What about you, Angela? Were you a sneaky sneaker?
I was not. I was actually a good girl,
Aw,
honestly.
I knew it.
Well, my daughter snuck out, and I'm like, why did you sneak out? All you had to do was walk out of the door, or you could have just told me. And she goes, I just wanted to experience it. Okay, whatevs.
That's hysterical. Regina's a good girl. Angela's a good girl. Todd and Christine and Nina. Well, Nina, did you sneak out?
No, I was a good girl.
See?
And you have sliding glass
I
doors.
had a sliding glass door, so I could have totally just walked right the fuck out and nobody would have known. But no, I didn't want to disappoint my parents like that, so I didn't.
Aw, what a good girl.
See, that's what every parent.
And after my parents
that's what every
separated, I
parent
really
hopes
didn't
for.
have a curfew. Like my mom, was just kind of, if everybody's got a 12 o'clock curfew and you're driving, you've got to drop people off, somebody's going to be late. Just tell me where you are and about what time you're going to be home. And, so I didn't have any need to sneak out.
Yeah, I used to sneak out on the top floor in junior high. But when I was in high school, the last 2 years of high school, I took the bedroom that was downstairs in the finished basement, because it was cooler. Like I had my own living room and all that crap and my own little kitchenette. It was like a little apartment in the house. Anyway, that was a cool bedroom to have because that wasn't when I was sneaking out anymore. I didn't sneak out because like you said, I was trustworthy. I got good grades. I did all the things I was supposed to do. So I didn't really have a curfew, but the windows were nice and easy to get people in after hours.
Party at my apartment. You got to come in the window over here.
Exactly. Yo, if you come here after midnight, you got to go to the window. Go to the left side of the house, second window, knock 2 times, somebody let you in.
Oh my God, I love it. Now, you know what? And the whole thing about sneaking out now, especially with doing this show, it's like, oh my God, you'll get killed. Don't do it.
Yep.
I know. It's amazing how we all survived. Well, at least people like Todd and myself. It's amazing how we survived. Getting in people's cars, racing all over town in the middle of the night. Like, it's amazing. We're very, very fortunate.
It is. And you are. And so are you, Hen. Ugh.
I'll never forget Jessica, my oldest, snuck out. And I was on call for cath lab, and I got paged for a STEMI, which for people who don't know, that's somebody having a heart attack. So I go to the hospital, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I get a text message, Mom, I'm locked out. I'm like, what the hell do you mean you're locked out? Which meant her sister was also home alone, by the way. So I had to call my mother at 3 o'clock in the morning and wake her up, tube my house keys to the ER charge nurse so that she could give them to my mom to go let dumbass in the house. And, yeah, that was an interesting evening because when I got home, there was an ass beating in the front yard.
Nice.
And my daughter told people for years that her mother gave her an ass whooping in the front yard. But if you got an ass whooping in the front yard, you deserved it.
I think we've covered the story, and we've learned some details about, well, I knew about your little sneaky sneak, but now I know about Christine's. So there's that. All right, everybody, so we're going to wrap it up. So key takeaways. Don't cheat.
McGruff is tough on crime.
McGruff is
Take a bite out of crime.
Don't get murdered.
Don't get murdered, and don't go sneaking out of the house. They'll freak your parents out. It's not like it's the 80s anymore. No more sneaking out. If you guys are sneaking out, don't do it. Stop
I'm
it.
totally sneaking into Christine's room tonight. That's my take home.
On your tippy toes.
I hear it's a good time.
That's the word on the street.
They're all made up.
It's all urban legend.
Well, here's something you probably didn't know.
What?
Baby elephants suck on their own trunk, just like babies suck on their thumbs. They do it for comfort.
Aww.
Just remember, Todd, you're not an elephant.
And that's the best takeaway of all. Todd Hen, you're not an elephant. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much. It was a great conversation. Thanks for coming back, everyone. Have a great week. And we will see you guys next week on Malice Monday when we are going to finish up John Norman Collins. Right? All right.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
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 Adios.
Bye.